Picture this, a grand English manor cloaked in snow. Its halls alive with the clink of glasses and the murmur of a Christmas Eve gathering. But beneath the festive cheer, secrets, simmer-debts, betrayals, a hidden daughter. At 11:17 p.m., a cry pierces the night, and Sir Edmund Winterlake is found dead, a letter-opener in his heart, in a locked study with no way in or out. Who among the family ambitious Clara, desperate Lionel, fragile Beatrice, or the mysterious secretary Evelyn wielded the blade? Why do footprints lead to a frozen lake with no return? And what truth lies in the wax-smeared brandy glass? Join Hercule Poirot, the master detective, as he unravels a web of lies in a chilling tale of murder, motive, and shocking revelations. Will the truth set this family free, or tear them apart forever? Chapter 2. The shadow of death there in Winterlake Manor had turned thick with dread, as though the very walls absorbed the shock of Sir Edmund Winterlake's murder. The study, once a sanctum of order and authority, was now a scene of grotesque disarray. The patriarch's lifeless form slumped across his desk, the letter-opener glinting cruelly in the lamplight. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the body, his pulse steady but his mind racing, cataloguing every detail of the grim tableau. Before him, the clock on the mantelpiece ticked relentlessly, marking the time at 11:23 p.m. A mere 6 minutes since the cry had shattered the evening's fragile peace. The household had gathered in the corridor outside the study, their faces a gallery of fear, suspicion, and suppressed grief. Clara Winterlake, her auburn hair dishevelled, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes darting between her father's body and the faces around her. Lionel Winterlake, his nervous tick now a near constant twitch, hovered near the doorway, muttering about locked doors and impossible crimes. Beatrice, pale and trembling, leaned heavily on her husband, Dr. Henry Vale, whose scholarly demeanour had given way to a tight-lipped frown. Margaret Winterlake, the late Sir Edmund's sister, stood apart, her cane tapping in impatient rhythm. On the floorboards, her expression unreadable but for a flicker of disdain. Gregory, her artist son, sketched feverishly in his notebook, as though capturing the scene might distance him from its horror. Rupert, the youngest Winterlake, paced like a caged animal, his charm replaced by a restless agitation. Evelyn Marsh, the secretary, lingered at the edge of the group, her sharp eyes taking in every movement, every whispered word. Mrs. Agnes Paul, the housekeeper, had summoned the local police, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Her son, Thomas, the footman, stood sullenly by her side, his gaze fixed on the floor. The cook, Mrs. Lottie Crane, had emerged from the kitchens, her apron dusted with flour, her face flushed with indignation that such a thing could happen under her watch. The manor, isolated by snow and distance, felt like a world unto itself, its inhabitants trapped in a web of their own making. Hastings took charge with the quiet authority of his military training, ushering the others back from the doorway. "No one must touch anything," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We must preserve the scene for the police and for Poirot." The name of Hercule Poirot, though absent, carried weight, and the group fell silent. There, eyes flickering with curiosity or unease. Clara was the first to speak, her voice brittle. "Who could have done this? Father was alone, surely he was alone." Her words hung in the air, less a question than a plea. "Alone, perhaps," Hastings replied, his tone measured, "but not unwatched. Someone was here, Miss Winterlake. The cry we heard, the state of this room, it all points to a struggle, and a swift one." Lionel's voice cracked as he interjected. "The door was locked, wasn't it?" "I heard him lock it when he went up." "How could anyone get in?" Hastings glanced at the heavy oak door, its brass key still in the lock, turned to secure it from the inside. A puzzle indeed, but one he knew Poirot would relish. "We shall see," he said, his eyes scanning the room for clues. The overturned brandy glass, the scattered papers, the open window letting in a chill draught despite the snow outside. These were pieces of a picture only Poirot could assemble. Dr. Vale stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles with a trembling hand. "As a physician, I should examine the body," he said, though his reluctance was palpable. "To confirm the cause." Hastings nodded, stepping aside but keeping a close watch. Vale approached the desk, his movements cautious, and leaned over Sir Edmund. After a moment, he straightened, his face grim. The letter opener pierced the heart. Death would have been almost instantaneous. The wound is clean, deliberate. Whoever did this knew exactly where to strike. A gasp rippled through the group. Beatrice stifled a sob, burying her face in her husband's shoulder. Margaret's came tapped sharply. Deliberate, she echoed, her voice cold. Then it was no accident, no sudden impulse. This was planned. Hastings noted her words, filing them away. He moved to the window, careful not to disturb the scene. The snow outside was undisturbed save for the single set of footprints he had noticed earlier, leading toward the lake. They were faint now, half buried by fresh snow, but their presence gnawed at him. Someone had been outside, perhaps watching, perhaps fleeing. He made a mental note to investigate further. When light permitted, the police arrived within the hour. A local inspector named Hargreaves, a stout man with a walrus mustache and a no-nonsense air. He was accompanied by a young constable, who looked faintly ill at the sight of the body. Hargreaves surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, barking orders to secure the room and take statements. No one leaves the manor, he declared. This is a murder, and the killer is likely still here. The guests were herded into the drawing room, where a fire still burned low. Hastings lingered near the study, watching as Hargreaves examined the scene. The inspector's methods were thorough, but lacked the finesse Hastings knew Poirot would bring. Hargreaves noted the locked door, the open window, the letter opener, and the disordered papers, muttering about a possible robbery gone wrong. Hastings, however, doubted it. The papers, though scattered, seemed oddly selective legal documents, a will. A letter half written in Sir Edmund's precise hand. A robbery would not be so discerning as the night wore on. Hastings took statements alongside the constable, his questions gentle but probing. Clara claimed to have been in the drawing-room, chatting with Beatrice when the cry was heard. Lionel swore he was in the library, alone, reading. Margaret and Gregory had been in the conservatory, discussing art. Rupert insisted he was in the billiard-room, practicing shots, though Thomas, the footman, contradicted him, saying he'd seen Rupert near the staircase moments before the cry. Even Marsh said she was in her room, preparing Sir Edmund's correspondence for the morning. Dr. Vale had been with Beatrice and the staff Mrs. Paul, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane claimed to have been below stairs, though their alibis were vague, tangled in the chaos of kitchen duties. Each story held a kernel of truth, Hastings suspected, but also a shadow of deceit. He noted the times, the cry at 11:17 p.m., the discovery of the body at 11:20 p.m., the police arrival at 12:15 a.m. The window of opportunity was narrow, the killer's movements precise. He thought of Poirot's maxim, the truth lies in the little details. The footprints, the locked door, the overturned glass each was a thread in a tapestry of deception. As dawn approached, the manor settled into an uneasy quiet. The guests, confined to their rooms under Hargreaves's orders. Hastings sat in the drawing-room, a notebook in hand, sketching a rough floor plan of the manor's upper floor. The study was at the end of a long corridor, accessible only by the main staircase, or a narrow servant's stair at the far end. The open window suggested an outside entry, but the snow undisturbed save for those footprints argued against it. The locked door was another riddle, the key still in place, untouched by any apparent tampering. Hastings's thoughts were interrupted by a telegram, delivered by a sleepy-eyed Thomas. It was from Poirot, brief and to the point, arriving Winterlake Manor, Christmas Day, noon. Observe all, mon ami. The grey cells await. Hastings smiled faintly, comforted by the promise of his friend's arrival. Poirot would see what others missed, unravel the lies woven into the night's events. As the first light of Christmas morning crept through the windows, Hastings stood. His resolve hardened. Sir Edmund's death was no random act but a calculated strike, its roots buried in the secrets of Winterlake Manor. The killer was among them, hiding behind a mask of grief or innocence. Hastings would watch, wait, and ensure no detail escaped. Him, For soon Hercule Poirot would arrive, and the truth, however cunningly concealed, would have nowhere to hide. Chapter 3. The arrival of Poirot's snow had ceased falling by mid-morning, leaving Winterlake Manor wrapped in a silence broken only by the occasional crackle of the fires and the murmurs of a household in mourning. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and wax, the Christmas decorations now a mocking contrast to the tragedy that had unfolded. Captain Arthur Hastings stood at the window of the drawing-room, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the driveway for the telltale plume of dust that would signal Hercule Poirot's arrival. The clock on the mantelpiece read 11:45 a.m., and the tension in the manor was palpable, as though the very walls awaited the detective's scrutiny. The police, under Inspector Hargreaves's brusque command, had spent the early hours questioning the household and searching the study. Their efforts, while diligent, had yielded little beyond the obvious. Sir Edmund Winterlake had been murdered with his own letter-opener. The door had been locked from the inside, and the open window suggested a possible escape route, though the undisturbed snow outside contradicted it. Hargreaves, with his walrus moustache and penchant for straightforward theories, leaned toward a robbery gone wrong, but Hastings knew better. The scattered papers, the selective disarray, the single set of footprints leading to the lake all pointed to a crime of precision, not panic. He had shared his observations with the inspector, who had grunted dismissively, muttering about fanciful notions. Hastings, undeterred, had preserved every detail for Poirot at precisely noon. A sleek black taxi rolled up the snow-dusted drive, its engine a low purr against the stillness. The door opened, and out stepped Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a tailored overcoat, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the slush. His moustache, a masterpiece of symmetry, twitched slightly as he surveyed the manor, his green eyes sharp with anticipation. A porter followed, struggling with a small but meticulously packed valise. Hastings hurried to the entrance hall, relief flooding him at the sight of his friend. "Mon ami," Poirot exclaimed, his voice warm but tinged with the gravity of the occasion. "You have found yourself in the midst of a drama most intriguing, n'est-ce pas?" He clasped Hastings's hand, his grip firm, then stepped back to adjust his scarf with a fastidious flick. "Tell me, Hastings, what have you observed? The little grey cells. They are eager for the details." Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's theatrical flourishes, led him to the drawing-room, where a fire crackled invitingly. The household had been summoned by Inspector Hargreaves, and they gathered in uneasy clusters, Clara Winterlake, her face pale but composed, Lionel fidgeting with his cufflinks, Beatrice clutching a glass of water as though it were a lifeline, Dr. Henry Vale adjusting his spectacles, Margaret, her cane a silent accusation, Gregory sketching in his notebook, Rupert pacing with restless energy, and Evelyn Marsh, the secretary, her expression unreadable. The staff, Mrs. Poole, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane, stood at the back, their deference tinged with wariness. Poirot entered with a quiet dignity, his presence commanding attention without effort. He bowed slightly to the group, his eyes sweeping over each face as though reading the secrets etched in their expressions. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and precise, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have been called to Winterlake Manor to unravel the tragedy that has befallen Sir Edmund Winterlake. A man does not die by accident with a letter-opener in his heart. Non, this is murder, and the truth lies hidden among you." A murmur rippled through the room, quickly stifled. Inspector Hargreaves, standing near the fireplace, cleared his throat. "Mr. Poirot, I've got this under control. We're dealing with a straightforward case, likely a thief caught in the act. No need for theatrics." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as mild amusement. "Theatrics, Inspector? Non. What you call theatrics, I call method. The truth, it is not found in the obvious, but in the small things, the glance, the gesture, the word unspoken. Tell me, what have you discovered?" Hargreaves bristled but recounted the facts: the locked door, the open window, the letter-opener, the scattered papers. He mentioned the footprints in the snow, now nearly obliterated by fresh drifts, and the alibis, which were vague and contradictory. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his finger steepled, his eyes never leaving the inspector's face. "Most interesting," Poirot said when Hargreaves finished. "But you have omitted the why. Inspector, a thief does not lock a door behind him. A thief does not select papers with care. And a thief does not strike with such precision. No, this is a crime of the heart, of motive deep and personal. I shall begin with the scene itself." He turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, you will accompany me to the study. The rest of you, remain here. Inspector, I trust you will ensure no one leaves." Hargreaves nodded grudgingly, and Poirot, with Hastings in tow, ascended the grand staircase. The study was as Hastings had left it, sealed by the police, the air still heavy with the metallic tang of blood. Sir Edmund's body had been removed to the local morgue, but the letter opener remained on the desk, its blade cleaned but its position marked, the papers, the overturned glass, the open window, all were untouched, preserved for investigation. Poirot moved with the grace of a cat, his eyes darting from one detail to another. He examined the lock, noting its firmness, then the window, its latch stiff but functional. "Curious," he murmured, peering at the sill. "The snow outside is undisturbed, yet the window is open. And these footprints you mentioned, Hastings leading. To the lake, yes," Hastings replied, recounting his observation from the previous night. "A single set, deep and deliberate, but no return tracks. They were fading fast in the snow." Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. He turned to the desk, his gloved fingers hovering over the papers, a will, he noted, lifting a document with care, half signed, addressed to a solicitor. "And this letter, my dear Clara, I have decided." It stops abruptly. Most suggestive. He examined the brandy glass, sniffing its contents, then the scattered books. Their spines cracked as though flung in haste. He paused at a small detail Hastings had overlooked, a single cigarette stub, half hidden beneath. A chair, its tip stained with a faint trace of lipstick. "Teens," Poirot said, holding it to the light. "Not Sir Edmund's, I think. He was not a smoker, none. And this lipstick subtle, but distinct. We shall see who favours such a shade." Hastings watched, marvelling at Poirot's ability to find significance in the mundane. The detective moved to the fireplace, where a few embers still glowed, and noted a scrap of charred paper in the grate. He retrieved it with tweezers, revealing a fragment of handwriting. "Must be stopped. The rest was ash. The plot thickens, mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "This is no robbery, but a tapestry of secrets. Someone wished to silence Sir Edmund, and they acted with audacity. But why? And how did they enter a locked room? They returned to the drawing-room where the household waited, their unease palpable. Poirot addressed them with calm authority. "I have seen the scene, and it speaks to me. Sir Edmund was preparing to alter his will, perhaps to reveal a truth long hidden. This, I believe, is the key. I shall question each of you in turn, and I ask for honesty. The little grey cells, they do not tolerate deception." Clara's eyes widened. Lionel's tick intensified, and Beatrice's glass trembled. Margaret's came tapped once, sharply. Poirot's gaze lingered on each, as though peeling back their facades. "We begin," he said, "with the alibis. Miss Clara, you were in the drawing-room at 11:17 p.m. Clara nodded, her voice steady but strained. "With Beatrice. We were discussing family matters, and you, Mr. Lionel." Poirot's tone was deceptively mild. "The library," Lionel stammered. "Reading. Alone." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "We shall verify. For now, I observe and I listen. The truth, it will emerge as it always does." As the interviews began, Hastings felt a familiar thrill. Poirot was in his element, his mind a scalpel cutting through the fog of lies. The manor, with its locked doors and hidden motives, was a puzzle only he could solve. But the clock was ticking, and the killer, still among them, was watching. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The drawing-room of Winterlake Manor, bathed in the pale light of a Christmas afternoon, seemed to shrink under the weight of Hercule Poirot's presence. The fire crackled, casting long shadows that danced across. The faces of the assembled household, each of whom sat in uneasy silence, aware that the Belgian detective's sharp eyes missed nothing. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the doorway, his notebook open, ready to record every word. Glance and hesitation. Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair like a judge presiding over a trial, adjusted his cuffs with meticulous care, his moustache, a perfect crescent above his calm, probing gaze. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding. We are gathered to uncover the truth behind the murder of Sir Edmund Winterlake. A man does not die in a locked room by chance. None. This is a crime of calculation, of motive deep and personal. I shall question each of you, and I ask for precision. The little grey cells, they thrive on the truth, and they will find it, no matter how cleverly it is hidden. Inspector Hargreaves, standing by the fireplace with his walrus moustache bristling, gave a sceptical grunt but said nothing. His earlier theory of a robbery had been quietly dismissed by Poirot's observations, and he now watched the detective with a mixture of resentment and curiosity. The household, from the poised Clara to the sullen Thomas, shifted uncomfortably, their alibis already fraying under scrutiny. Poirot began with Clara Winterlake, who sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her auburn hair catching the firelight. Miss Winterlake, he said, his tone polite but incisive. You say you were in this very room at 11:17 p.m. when the cry was heard, with Mrs. Vale. Oui? What precisely were you discussing? Clara's eyes flickered, but her voice was steady. Family matters. Monsieur Poirot, Beatrice and I were reminiscing about Christmases past and father's plans for the estate. Nothing of consequence. Poirot's head tilted, his eyes narrowing slightly. Nothing of consequence, yet your father. He spoke of a momentous announcement, one that would alter the future of Winterlake. Did you not discuss this? Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. He mentioned no details, only that it concerned the will. I assumed it was about the inheritance, but he was always secretive. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Beatrice Vale, whose delicate features were drawn with strain. Her green gown, so vibrant the previous evening, now seemed garish against her pallor. Mrs. Vale, you confirmed this conversation, and where was your husband, Dr. Vale, at this time? Beatrice's hand trembled as she set down her glass of water. Yes, I was with Clara. Henry was with me earlier, but he stepped out to fetch a book from the library, I think. He returned just after the cry. Dr. Henry Vale, adjusting his spectacles, nodded quickly. Quite right. I was in the library looking for a volume on botany. I heard the cry and returned immediately. Poirot's gaze lingered on Vale, noting the slight sheen of sweat on his brow. The library, you say? And did you see Mr. Lionel Winterlake there, who also claims to have been reading at that hour? Lionel, seated across the room, started, his cufflinks glinting as he tugged at his collar. I was there, yes, reading Thackeray. I didn't see. Henry, I mean, Dr. Vale. The library is large, you know. Most curious, Poirot murmured, his fingers steepled. To men in the library, yet neither sees the other. We shall return to this. He turned to Margaret Winterlake, whose stern face betrayed no emotion but for the tight grip on her cane. Madam, you were in the conservatory with your son, Gregory, oui? What occupied you at such a late hour? Margaret's voice was cold, precise. We were discussing his art. Gregory's work lacks discipline, and I was offering guidance. We heard the cry and came at once. Gregory, slouched in a corner, ceased sketching long enough to nod. Mother's right. We were arguing, really. I didn't hear anything until the cry. Poirot's eyes flicked to the notebook in Gregory's hands, its pages filled with rapid sketches. You draw even now, monsieur. Did you sketch last night? Perhaps a view of the lake, the snow, the manor? Gregory's pencil stilled, his jaw tightening. No, just doodles. Nothing important. The detective's smile was enigmatic. Nothing is unimportant in a murder, monsieur. He moved on to Rupert, whose restless pacing had drawn every eye. And you, Mr. Rupert Winterlake, you claim the billiard room, yet the footman, Thomas, places you near the staircase just before the cry. Rupert's charm flickered, his smile strained. Thomas is mistaken. I was in the billiard room, practicing shots. I came up when I heard the commotion. Thomas, standing at the back, shifted uncomfortably, his sullen gaze meeting Poirot's. I saw what I saw. He muttered. He was by the stairs, looking shifty. Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper, placed a restraining hand on her son's arm. Thomas, mind your tongue. Monsieur Poirot, we were below stairs, preparing for tomorrow's breakfast. We heard nothing until the cry. Mrs. Crane, the cook, nodded vigorously, her flour-dusted hands clasped. We were in the kitchens, a goose to roast, mince pies to finish. No time for gallivanting upstairs. Evelyn Marsh, the secretary, spoke last, her voice quiet but clear. I was in my room, sorting Sir Edmund's correspondence. I heard the cry and joined the others. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his eyes darting from one face to another. Hastings, scribbling notes, marvelled at how Poirot seemed to hear not just the words but the silences between them. The detective rose, pacing slowly before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. Merci, all of you. Your accounts are illuminating, but they are not complete. There are contradictions, small but significant. The locked door, the open window, the cigarette stub with its trace of lipstick, these are the threads of truth, and I shall weave them together. He paused, his gaze settling on the cigarette stub, which he had placed in a small envelope. Who among you smokes, mesdames? The lipstick, it is a clue most precise. Clara flushed, touching her lips. I smoke occasionally, but not last night, and my lipstick is coral, not whatever that is. Beatrice shook her head, her voice faint. I don't smoke, never have. Evelyn Marsh met Poirot's gaze steadily. I smoke, Monsieur Poirot, but I use no lipstick. My cigarettes are plain, and I was in my room. Poirot nodded, tucking the envelope away. We shall see, for now. I observe that Sir Edmund's death coincides with his announcement of a new will. This suggests a motive, perhaps money, perhaps revenge, perhaps a secret he meant to reveal. I ask you to reflect on your actions, your words, your truths. The little grey cells. They are patient, but they are relentless. As the household dispersed, some to their rooms, others to whisper in corners, Hastings approached Poirot. What do you make of it, old chap? They're all hiding something, aren't they? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oui, mon ami. Each has a secret, each a motive. The alibis. They are like a house of cards, plausible until you touch them. The cigarette, the footprints, the half-written letter, these are not accidents. Someone planned this crime with care, but they have made one mistake. They have left clues for Hercule Poirot. He glanced at the clock to 15 p.m. and smiled. Come, Hastings, let us walk to the lake where those footprints lead. The snow may hide much, but it cannot hide everything. As they donned coats and stepped into the crisp air, Hastings felt the familiar thrill of the chase. The manor loomed. Behind them, its secrets locked within, but Poirot's mind was already at work, unravelling the threads of a murder that was anything but simple. Chapter 5. The red herrings snow-crunched beneath Hercule Poirot's polished shoes, as he and Captain Arthur Hastings made their way toward the frozen lake, the winter sun casting a pale, unforgiving light over the grounds of Winterlake Manor. The air was sharp, biting at Hastings's cheeks, but Poirot seemed impervious, his scarf meticulously arranged, his eyes fixed on the faint trail of footprints that led from the manor to the water's edge. The prints, now softened by fresh snow, were still discernible as single track, deliberate and deep, with no return path. Hastings, his breath visible in the chill, felt the weight of the mystery pressing heavier with each step. Poirot. Hastings ventured. Those footprints, are they the killers? They lead to the lake. But there's no sign of anyone coming back. It's as if they vanished. Poirot's mustache twitched. A sign of amusement or irritation, Hastings could never quite tell. Vanished, mon ami, non. The human does not vanish like a ghost in a tale. The footprints, they tell a story, but it is not the one you think. Observe, and let the little grey cells work. They reach the lake. Its surface a sheet of ice glinting under the sun. The footprints stopped abruptly at the edge, where a low stone wall marked the boundary between. Lawn and water. Poirot crouched, his gloved fingers tracing the final print, his brow furrowed. Curious. He murmured, "The snow here is disturbed, but not by a struggle. A deliberate act. Perhaps to mislead." Hastings frowned. "Mislead, you mean?" "A red herring, precisement," Poirot said, rising with a flourish. "The killer wishes us to believe they fled this way, perhaps to suggest an outsider. But the snow, it betrays them. No tracks return, and the lake is frozen. No one swam away in this cold, none. We must look closer to home." They returned to the manor, where the household remained under Inspector Hargreaves's watchful eye. The drawing-room was a hive of whispers, the guests' nerves fraying as the reality of the murder settled in. Poirot, undeterred by the tension, resumed his questioning, his manner calm but relentless, like a surgeon probing for the source of. Around, Inspector Hargreaves, however, had his own theory, one he shared with a smug certainty. "It's the footman, Thomas Poole," he declared, pulling Poirot and Hastings aside. "He's got a sullen look about him, and he was near the staircase just before the cry. Shifty type. No respect for his betters. I've seen his kind before, Grudge. Against the master, probably after money." Poirot's eyes gleamed with polite skepticism. "A compelling theory, Inspector. And what evidence supports it?" Hargreaves puffed out his chest. "He contradicted Rupert Winterlake's alibi, didn't he? Said he saw him near the stairs. Sounds like he's covering his own tracks. And those footprints outside could be his sneaking out after the deed." Poirot nodded thoughtfully, but Hastings caught the glint in his eye. "We should question Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, "but let us not be hasty. The obvious suspect is often the least guilty." Thomas was summoned, his sullen demeanour more pronounced under Poirot's scrutiny. He stood stiffly, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on a point above Poirot's head. "I didn't do it," he said before Poirot could speak. "I was in the kitchens with Mother and Mrs. Crane. I only went up to fetch more firewood, and that's when I saw Mr. Rupert by the stairs." Poirot's head tilted, his gaze piercing. "You are certain of the time, Monsieur Thomas, and what was Mr. Rupert doing, precisely?" Thomas shifted, his jaw tight. "It was just before the cry 11:15. Maybe. He was standing there, looking up the stairs, like he was waiting for something. Didn't say a word to me. And you returned to the kitchens immediately?" Then we heard the cry, and all hell broke loose." Poirot dismissed Thomas, with a nod, turning to Hastings. "A red herring, perhaps, this accusation against young Rupert. Or perhaps not. Let us speak to Monsieur Rupert again." Rupert Winterlake, summoned next, entered with his usual charm, though it was strained, his smile more a grimace. "Monsieur Poirot, this is absurd. Thomas is lying. I was in the billiard room, as I said. I only went upstairs after the cry." Poirot's finger steepled, his voice deceptively mild. "Yet Thomas places you at the staircase moments before the murder. And you, monsieur, have a reputation for, how shall we say, financial difficulties. Sir Edmund's new will, it might not have favoured you." Rupert's face flushed, his charm crumbling. "That's nonsense. Father was always bailing me out. Why would I kill him? Besides, the door was locked. How could I have gotten in?" A question most pertinent, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "But motives, they are like shadows hidden until the light falls upon them. Tell me, what did you know of your father's announcement?" Rupert hesitated, his fingers drumming on his knee. "He didn't say much, just that it would change things. I thought maybe he was cutting someone out. Clara, perhaps. She's been pushing him to sell the estate." Clara, overhearing from her seat, stood abruptly, her eyes flashing. "That's a lie, Rupert. I wanted to preserve Winterlake, not sell it. Father and I discussed modernizing the estate. That's all." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. "Enough. The truth, It is not found in accusations, but in facts. Let us consider the cigarette stub. Found in the study. Miss Clara, you smoke. We and Mrs. Vale, you do not. Miss Marsh, you admit to smoking, but without lipstick, yet the stub bears. A trace squirrel, you said. Miss Clara. Clara nodded, her composure faltering. Yes. But I wasn't in the study. I haven't smoked since yesterday morning. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. We shall verify for now. I note another detail. The papers on Sir Edmund's desk. A will, half-signed, and a letter to you. Miss Clara, unfinished. My dear Clara, I have decided. What decision, I wonder? Clara's face paled, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to the others, his gaze sweeping the room. Each of you has a secret, a reason to fear Sir Edmund's announcement. Money, power. Shame, these are motives as old as time. But one of you acted, and the clues, they point to you. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling like dust. Hastings, watching closely, noted the reactions, Lionel's tick, Beatrice's trembling hands, Gregory's sudden stillness. Even Margaret, usually so composed, gripped her cane tightly. Poirot continued, his voice low but relentless. The locked door. It is a puzzle, but not insoluble. The window, open yet with no tracks in the snow, another misdirection. And the footprints to the lake. They lead nowhere. These are the tricks of a clever mind, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. He paused, his eyes resting on Evelyn Marsh, who had remained silent throughout. Miss Marsh, you were Sir Edmund's secretary. You knew his plans, his correspondence. Did you know of this will? Evelyn's sharp eyes met his, unflinching. I typed his letters. Monsieur Poirot, I knew he was revising the will, but not the details. He was private about such matters, and yet, Poirot said, you were in your room, alone, when the cry was heard. A convenient alibi, none. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I had no reason to harm Sir Edmund. He was a good employer. Poirot nodded, dismissing her for now. He turned to Hastings, his voice barely above a whisper. Mon ami, the red. Herrings multiply. Thomas accuses Rupert, Rupert accuses Clara, and the cigarette stub accuses someone who may not wish to be accused. But the truth, it lies in the contradictions. We must look deeper. As the afternoon waned, Poirot requested a map of the manor which Mrs. Poole provided. Her hands steady despite the strain. He studied it intently, noting the study's position, the servants' stare, the proximity of the billiard room and library. The timing, he murmured, it is critical. The cry at 11:17, the body found at 11:20. A narrow window, yet wide enough for a clever killer. Hastings, glancing at his watch, 3:45 p.m., felt the familiar thrill of Poirot's method. The detective was circling, closing in on the truth. But the red herrings were thick, obscuring the path. The killer, still among them, was playing a dangerous game, and Poirot was ready to call their bluff. Chapter 6. A clue in detail. Late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of Winterlake Manor, casting a muted glow over the drawing room, where Hercule Poirot continued his methodical unravelling of the mystery. The air was thick. With tension, the household's nerves stretched taut as they awaited the detective's next move. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the fireplace, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and impatience, knowing that Poirot's mind was piecing together a puzzle invisible to others. The clock on the mantelpiece read for 30 p.m., its steady tick a reminder that time was both ally and adversary in the hunt for Sir Edmund Winterlake's killer. Poirot, seated with his usual precision, held the manor's floor plan in his gloved hands, his eyes tracing the lines of corridors and staircases. The map, provided by Mrs. Poole, was detailed, showing the study's isolated position at the end of the upper corridor, accessible only by the main staircase or the narrow servants' stair. The open window, the locked door, the cigarette stub, with its trace of lipstick, these clues, Poirot had declared, were the threads of truth. But one detail had caught his attention above all others. A detail so small it had nearly escaped notice. Mon ami, Poirot said, Turning to Hastings with a gleam in his eye, you recall the brandy glass. Overturned on Sir Edmund's desk, it was not merely a casualty of the struggle. None, it tells a story of its own. Hastings frowned, recalling the scene. The glass? It was spilled, yes, but I thought it was just part of the chaos. Papers scattered, books toppled. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of satisfaction. Chaos, oui, but calculated chaos. The glass was overturned, yet the brandy poured in. A precise manner as though placed, not flung. And there, on the rim, a faint smudge, not lipstick, but something else. Wax, perhaps, or oil. A detail most curious. He rose, pacing slowly before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us consider the sequence. Sir Edmund retires to his study at 11 o'clock, locking the door. At 11:17, a cry is heard, followed by a thud. By 11:20, you, Hastings, find him dead. The letter opener in his heart. The window is open, the room in disarray. Yet the snow outside is undisturbed save for those footprints to the lake. And the glass, why does it matter? Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic musings, ventured a guess. You think the glass was tampered with, poisoned perhaps, before the stabbing? Poirot shook his head. None, not poison. The good Dr. Vale confirmed the letter opener was the cause of death. But the glass, it was touched by someone other than Sir Edmund. Someone who was in the study, perhaps before the cry, perhaps during. We must test this much. He summoned Mrs. Poole, who entered with her usual quiet efficiency, her face pale but composed. Madam, Poirot said, the brandy in Sir Edmund's study, where was it kept? Mrs. Poole's brow furrowed. In a decanter on the sideboard. Sir, it was his favourite, a fine cognac. I filled it myself yesterday morning. And who had access to the study? Only Sir Edmund, sir, and myself for cleaning. Miss Marsh sometimes worked there, typing his letters. No one else unless he invited them. Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a polite bow. He then turned to Inspector Hargreaves, who lingered near the door, his scepticism barely concealed. Inspector, I require the brandy glass to be examined. The smudge on the rim, have your men test it for wax or oil. It may tell us who touched it last. Hargreaves grumbled but agreed, dispatching a constable to retrieve the glass. Poirot, undeterred, shifted his attention to the household, who sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between the detective and each other. Clara Winterlake clutched her handkerchief, her composure fraying. Lionel's tic had grown more pronounced, his fingers fidgeting with his cufflinks. Beatrice, pale and silent, leaned against Dr. Vale, who adjusted his spectacles with a nervous twitch. Margaret's cane tapped a slow rhythm, while Gregory sketched furiously, his pencil scratching like a heartbeat. Rupert paced, his charm replaced by agitation, and Evelyn Marsh, the secretary, watched with her usual quiet intensity. Monsieur Lionel, Poirot said, his voice cutting through the tension, you claim you were in the library, reading Thackeray, at 11:17. Yet Dr. Vale, also in the library, did not see you. How do you explain this? Lionel's face flushed, his tic jerking violently. It's a large library. Shelves everywhere, nooks and corners. I was in the back, near the history section. He must have been elsewhere. Dr. Vale nodded quickly. Quite possible. I was near the botany shelves on the other side. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And what book, Dr. Vale, did you fetch? You said you sought a volume on botany. Vale hesitated, his fingers fumbling with his spectacles. Flora Britannica. I wanted to check something about medicinal plants, most interesting. Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. We shall verify this book exists. For now, let us consider another detail, the cigarette stub. Miss Clara, you say your lipstick is coral, yet the stub bears a shade more. Rose, perhaps. Miss Marsh, you smoke but use no lipstick. Mrs. Vale, you do not smoke. Yet someone left this stub in the study. Beatrice's hand trembled, spilling a drop of water from her glass. I told you. I don't smoke, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara's eyes flashed. It wasn't mine, Monsieur Poirot. I wasn't in the study. Evelyn Marsh spoke calmly. Nor was I. My cigarettes are unfiltered, and I smoke in my room or the garden, not indoors. Poirot's gaze lingered on each woman, his expression unreadable. We shall see. The stub, like the glass, is a clue that speaks. And then there is the letter. My dear Clara, I have decided. Unfinished, yet deliberate. What decision, Miss Clara, did your father intend to share? Clara's face paled, her hands twisting the handkerchief. I don't know. He never told me. He was always cryptic about the will. Poirot nodded, turning to the map. The study's position is key. The main staircase, the servants' stair. The window, these are the paths to murder. But the locked door, it is the heart of the puzzle. How does one enter a locked room, kill, and leave no trace? He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Unless, of course, the door was not locked when the killer entered. Perhaps Sir Edmund opened it himself for someone he trusted. Or perhaps the lock was tampered with. A gasp rippled through the group. Margaret's cane stopped mid-tap, her eyes narrowing. Are you suggesting one of us had a key? She asked, her voice sharp. Poirot smiled faintly. I suggest nothing, madam. I observe, and I note that the servants' stair, so close to the study, is narrow, hidden. Who among you used it last night? Mrs. Poole spoke up, her voice firm. Only Thomas for firewood, and myself earlier to deliver Sir Edmund's tea. No one else. Thomas nodded, his sullenness returning. Just the firewood, like I said. Poirot's gaze lingered on Thomas, then shifted to Rupert, who had stopped pacing. And you, Monsieur Rupert, so near the stairs, according to Thomas. What were you waiting for? Rupert's jaw tightened. I wasn't waiting. I was thinking about Father's announcement. It worried me. Worried, Poirot echoed, his voice soft but piercing. Because it threatened your debts, perhaps? Or something more? Rupert said nothing, his silence louder than words. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, the glass, the stub, the letter, these are not accidents. They point to a mind that plans, but not perfectly. The killer has left a trail, and we are close. As the clock struck 5 p.m., the constable returned, reporting that the smudge on the brandy glass was indeed wax, likely from a candle. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Wax in a room lit by lamps, a candle, perhaps, held by the killer. To see in the dark. We must find this candle. Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation. The clue, so small, was a crack in the killer's facade. Poirot was closing in, and the truth, however elusive, was beginning to take shape. Chapter 7. More lies. Surfacey twilight of Christmas Day settled over Winterlake Manor, casting long shadows that seemed to deepen the unease permeating the house. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot continued his relentless inquiry, was a study in contrasts, the warmth of the fire clashing with the chill of suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, his notebook filled with cryptic observations, watching as Poirot paced with the precision of a metronome, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. The clock read 6:15 p.m., its steady ticker, reminder that each passing hour brought the truth closer or pushed it further into the shadows. Poirot held the small envelope containing the cigarette stub, its rose-tinted lipstick a silent accusation. The discovery of wax on the brandy glass had sharpened his focus, a clue that hinted at a killer who moved in darkness, perhaps with a candle to light their way. But it was the undercurrents of the household, the hidden affairs, financial strains, and bitter feuds that now drew his attention. The alibis, so carefully constructed, were beginning to crack, revealing glimpses of the secrets beneath. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice a velvet blade. We have established that Sir Edmund Winterlake was murdered in a locked room, with a letter opener driven into his heart. The clues: the cigarette stub, the wax on the brandy glass. The unfinished letter point to a crime of motive, not chance. But motives, they are like the roots of a tree, hidden beneath the surface. Let us dig deeper. He turned to Clara Winterlake, whose composure had frayed, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins. Miss Clara, the letter on your father's desk. My dear Clara, I have decided, suggests a personal matter. What did Sir Edmund wish to tell you? Clara's hands twisted her handkerchief, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. I told. You? I don't know. He was always cryptic. It could have been about the estate, the will, anything. Anything, Poirot echoed, his tone deceptively mild. Yet you argued with him 2 days ago. Did you not? Mrs. Poole overheard raised voices in the study. Something about selling Winterlake Manor. Clara flushed, her voice sharp. It wasn't an argument. I suggested modernizing the estate, new investments, perhaps a hotel. Father disagreed. That's all. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Disagreed strongly, we? And this disagreement, it was known to others. Mrs. Poole, standing at the back, nodded reluctantly. I heard them, sir. Miss Clara was insistent. Sir Edmund said the manor would stay as it was, no matter what. A murmur rippled through the room. Rupert, pacing near the door, stopped abruptly. Clara's not the only one with secrets, he said, his voice edged with defiance. What? About Lionel? Always borrowing money, always scheming. Father was fed up with him. Lionel's tick jerked violently, his cufflinks glinting as he stood. That's a lie. I paid my debts. Father and I were on good terms, were you? Poirot asked, his gaze piercing. Yet Sir Edmund's ledger, found among the papers, shows a loan to you, unpaid, for £5,000, a significant sum. Lionel's face drained of colour, his hands trembling. It was a temporary arrangement. I was going to repay him. With what? Margaret Winterlake's voice cut through the room, cold and accusing. Your gambling, Lionel, has been a disgrace to the family. Edmund was going to cut you off, wasn't he? Lionel's tick intensified, his voice rising. That's not true. He never said that. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the outburst. Enough. The ledger, it speaks of financial motives. But there are others. Madam Beatrice, you have been quiet. Your husband, Dr. Vale, was in the library, yet no one saw him fetch this Flora Britannica. And you were with Miss Clara, but your hands tremble, your eyes avoid mine. What do you hide? Beatrice's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Dr. Vale moved to her side, his face pale. She's overwrought, Monsieur Poirot. This tragedy, it's too much for her. Too much. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes never leaving Beatrice. Or is it guilt? The cigarette stub, it bears a shade of rose lipstick. Not yours, you say, for you do not smoke, yet I observe your lips, madam, and they are painted rose, not coral. Beatrice gasped, her hand flying. To her mouth, I don't smoke. I told you that. Someone must have taken my lipstick. A convenient theft, Poirot mused. And the wax on the brandy glass perhaps from a candle used to light a cigarette? Or to see in the dark, as the killer moved. Dr. Vale adjusted. His spectacles, his voice tight. This is absurd. Beatrice was with Clara, and I was in the library. As I said, Poirot turned to Gregory, whose pencil had stilled, his notebook clutched tightly. Monsieur Gregory, your sketches are most intriguing. You were in the conservatory with your mother, yet you draw constantly. Did you sketch the lake, perhaps, on the night of the murder? Those footprints, they lead there. Gregory's eyes darkened, his voice low. I told you, they're just doodles. I wasn't at the lake, yet your boots. Poirot said, pointing to the mud-streaked soles by the door, they bear traces of snow and earth, as if you walked outside recently. Curious, Margaret's cane tapped sharply. Leave my son alone, Monsieur Poirot. He's an artist, not a murderer. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Art, madam, can conceal as much as it reveals. Let us turn to Miss Marsh. You knew Sir Edmund's plans, his correspondence. Did he speak of a scandal, perhaps one that might ruin someone? Even Marsh's sharp eyes met his, unflinching. He mentioned no scandal, only the will, and even that was vague. I typed what he dictated, nothing more. And yet, Poirot said, you were alone in your room with access to the servant's stair. A convenient position, Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. I had no reason to harm him. He trusted me. Trust, Poirot said. Softly is often betrayed. He turned to the staff, his gaze settling on Thomas and you. Monsieur Thomas, you saw Rupert by the stairs, but you, too, had access to the servants' stair, and your mother, Mrs. Poole, delivered tea to the study earlier. Did you see anything unusual? Mrs. Poole's face tightened. Nothing, sir. I left the tea at 10 o'clock and returned below stairs. Thomas nodded, his sullenness masking unease. Like I said, I was fetching firewood. I didn't go near the study. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet the wax, the cigarette. The letter these suggest someone was in the study, someone Sir Edmund knew, a secret affair, a financial betrayal, a family grudge. These are the roots of murder. He paused, addressing the room. I ask you to search your rooms for a candle, one recently used. The wax on the glass, it is a clue most precise, and I warn you the killer is among us, watching, listening. The little grey cells, they are close to the truth. As the household dispersed, their faces a mix of fear and defiance, Hastings approached Poirot. You're stirring them up, old chap. That wax. The lipstick, it's narrowing the field, isn't it? Poirot nodded, his voice low. Oui, mon ami. The lies are surfacing like bubbles in a pond. Clara's argument, Lionel's debts, Beatrice's lipstick. Gregory's boots, each is a piece of the puzzle. But the candle, it is the key. We must find it before the killer hides it forever. As the clock struck 7 p.m., Poirot requested a search of the manor with Hargreaves's reluctant approval. The household scattered, their secrets laid bare, their lies unraveling. Hastings felt the tension mounting, the truth tantalizingly close, yet still obscured by the shadows of Winter Lake. Manor. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. The evening shadows deepened within Winter Lake Manor, cloaking the drawing-room in a somber hush as the clock struck 8 p.m. The fire, now a low flicker, cast wavering light across the faces of the household, each marked by strain, suspicion, or barely concealed panic. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his compact figure radiating authority, his mustache immaculate despite the long day's work. Captain Arthur Hastings, stationed near the door with his notebook, felt the air crackle with anticipation. Poirot's methodical probing had peeled back layers of deceit, and now, as the search for the telltale candle continued, the tension was reaching a breaking point. The detective's latest revelation, the wax smudge on the brandy glass, had sent ripples of unease through the household. The search, conducted under Inspector Hargreaves's grudging supervision, had turned up nothing yet. But Poirot's insistence that a candle was key had unnerved the suspects. Hastings watched as their facades crumbled, their carefully crafted alibis fraying under the weight of scrutiny. Someone, he sensed, was about to crack. Poirot began with a measured address, his voice calm but piercing. Mesdames et messieurs, we stand at a crossroads. The clue's the cigarette stub, the wax. The unfinished letter point to a truth that cannot be hidden much longer. Sir Edmund Winterlake was murdered not by a stranger, but by someone he knew. Someone in this room. The candle, it is the key to the killer's movements. I ask again, who among you used a candle last night? A heavy silence followed, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Clara Winterlake, her auburn hair now fully loose, clutched her arms as if to ward off a chill. Lionel's tig twitched violently, his eyes darting to the door. Beatrice Vale, pale and trembling, sat rigid beside her husband, Dr. Henry Vale, whose scholarly air had given way to nervous agitation. Margaret Winterlake's cane rested still, her stern face betraying a flicker of unease. Gregory, her son, had stopped sketching, his notebook closed, his gaze fixed on the floor. Rupert paced, his charm replaced by a restless energy that bordered on desperation. Evelyn Marsh, the secretary, remained composed, her sharp eyes watching Poirot with quiet intensity. The staff, Mrs. Poole, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane stood at the back, their deference tinged with fear. It was Beatrice who broke. First, her voice a strangled whisper. I can't bear it any longer. She stood abruptly, her green gown swaying, her hands pressed to her face. I lied, Monsieur Poirot. I do smoke. The cigarette stub, it's mine. A gasp rippled through the room. Dr. Vale reached for her, his face ashen. "Beatrice, no, you don't have to. I do," she cried, her voice breaking. "I was in the study earlier that evening. Before Father went up, I smoked a cigarette, just one, to calm my nerves. He was so angry with me, with all of us. He said he was changing the will, cutting us out unless we proved ourselves. I didn't kill him, I swear. But I was there." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his head tilted. "Most interesting, madam. You were in the study, with a cigarette-bearing rose lipstick. And what time was this?" Beatrice's hands trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Around 10 o'clock. I left before he locked the door. I swear, he was alive when I left." Dr. Vale stood, his voice tight. "She's telling the truth, Poirot. Beatrice was upset. She came to me afterward, in the drawing room. She couldn't have been there when the cry was heard." Poirot's gaze shifted to Vale, his tone deceptively mild. "And you, Doctor, were in the library, seeking a book you cannot name with certainty. Yet no one saw you there. How convenient." Vale's spectacles glinted as he adjusted them, his voice rising. "I was there. I don't know why Lionel didn't see me. I didn't touch the brandy glass or any candle." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Calm yourself, Doctor. The truth, it emerges in its own time." He turned to Clara, whose face had paled at Beatrice's confession. "Miss Clara, your sister admits to being in the study. Did you know of this visit?" Clara shook her head, her voice strained. "No, she didn't tell me. But Father was upset that night. He mentioned the will to me, too, earlier in the day. He said he was tired of our squabbling." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Squabbling? A family divided? We, and you, Monsieur Rupert, you were worried about this will, were you not? Your debts, they are considerable." Rupert stopped pacing, his jaw tight. "I didn't kill him, Poirot. Yes, I owed money, but Father always helped me. Why would I risk that? Perhaps," Poirot said, "because the help was about to end." He turned to Lionel, whose tick seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. "And you, Monsieur Lionel, with your unpaid loan, did Sir Edmund threaten to cut you off, as your aunt suggests?" Lionel's voice cracked, his hands clenched. "He was angry, yes, but I didn't. I wasn't in the study. I was in the library." Margaret's cane tapped sharply. "Enough lies, Lionel. Edmund told me he was done with your schemes. He said the will would set things right." Poirot's gaze shifted to Margaret. "And you, madam, what did? You know of this will. As his sister, you were close to him. None." Margaret's lips pursed, her eyes cold. "Edmund confided in me, yes. He was tired of the family's greed. He planned to leave the estate to charity, with only small bequests for the rest. He wanted to teach them a lesson." A stunned silence followed. Clara's handkerchief fell to the floor. Rupert swore under his breath. Lionel's tick stopped, his face frozen in shock. Beatrice sobbed quietly, her husband's arm around her. Poirot's voice cut through the tension. "A motive most powerful, a fortune lost, a legacy denied. But let us return to the candle. The wax on the brandy glass, it suggests someone moved in darkness, perhaps to conceal their presence. Who among you used a candle last night?" No one spoke, but Gregory's hand tightened on his notebook, drawing Poirot's attention. "Monsieur, Gregory, your boots bear traces of snow as if you walked outside. Did you carry a candle, perhaps, to light your way to the lake?" Gregory's eyes darkened, his voice low. "I didn't go to the lake. I was in the conservatory with Mother. I don't use candles, I have a torch." "A torch," Poirot mused. "Yet the wax, it is not from a torch. Miss Marsh, you are quiet. As Sir Edmund's secretary, you had access to his study, his secrets. Did you see a candle there?" Evelyn Marsh met his gaze steadily. "No, Monsieur Poirot. The study was lit by lamps. I saw no candle." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "We shall search again with care. The candle, it is the key to the killer's path." He turned to Inspector Hargreaves, who had been watching with growing impatience. "Inspector, I request a thorough search of the bedrooms, the servants' quarters, the attic. The candle must be found." Hargreaves grunted but agreed, dispatching his constable. As the household dispersed, Beatrice's confession hung in the air, a crack in the wall of lies. Hastings approached Poirot, his voice low, Beatrice's. "Admission it changes things, doesn't it? She was in the study, but before the murder. Could she have—" Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. Her confession, it is truthful but incomplete. She hides something, still perhaps fear, perhaps shame. But the candle, the wax it points to another. The killer used the darkness to their advantage, and we are close to unmasking them." As the clock struck 8:30 p.m., the search resumed, the manor's corridors echoing with footsteps and whispered fears. Hastings felt the weight of Beatrice's breakdown, a turning point that had exposed the family's fractures. The truth was near, but the killer, sensing Poirot's approach, was growing desperate, their secrets teetering on the edge of revelation. Chapter 9. The trap there in Winterlake Manor grew heavier as the clock struck 9 p.m., the fire in the drawing-room casting flickering shadows that seemed to mirror the shifting allegiances and hidden truths among the household. Hercule Poirot, his compact figure radiating calm authority, stood before the assembled suspects, his green eyes glinting with the certainty of a hunter closing in on his prey. Captain Arthur Hastings, positioned near the doorway with his notebook, felt the tension coil tighter, as though the manor itself held its breath. Beatrice's confession had cracked the facade of the Winterlake family, and now Poirot was ready to apply the psychological pressure that would force the killer to betray themselves. The search for the candlelights waxed a damning clue on the brandy. Glass had yielded nothing definitive, though Inspector Hargreaves's men had combed the bedrooms, servants' quarters, and attic with dogged thoroughness. Poirot, undeterred, had declared that the absence of the candle was itself a clue, suggesting the killer had hidden or destroyed it. But it was the web of motives: greed, betrayal, fear of a lost inheritance that now drove his strategy. He had gathered the household not to question further, but to set a trap, one designed to provoke a reaction that would reveal the truth. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice smooth but laced with steel, "we approach the heart of this mystery. Sir Edmund Winterlake was murdered in a locked room, his life taken with a precision that speaks of intent. The clues: the cigarette stub, the wax on the brandy glass, the footprints to the lake are pieces of a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, have nearly assembled it. Tonight I shall reveal what I know, and the killer, they will not remain silent." A murmur rippled through the room, quickly stifled. Clara Winterlake sat rigid, her auburn hair framing a face pale with strain. Lionel's tick jerked violently, his cufflinks catching the firelight. Beatrice, still shaken from her confession, clung to Dr. Henry Vale, whose scholarly calm had eroded into nervous glances. Margaret Winterlake's cane rested still, her stern gaze fixed on Poirot. Gregory, her son, clutched his notebook, his eyes dark with unease. Rupert paced, his charm replaced by a restless edge. Evelyn Marsh, the secretary, watched with her usual quiet intensity, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The staff, Mrs. Poole, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane, stood at the back, their faces a mix of deference and dread. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache a perfect crescent. "Let us reconstruct the night of the murder. Sir Edmund retires to his study at 11 o'clock, locking the door. At 11:17, a cry is heard, followed by a thud. By 11:20, Captain Hastings finds him dead, the letter opener in his heart. The room is in disarray, the window open. Yet the snow outside shows no tracks save those leading to the lake. The brandy glass bears a smudge of wax, the cigarette stub a trace of rose lipstick. And the letter, my dear Clara, I have decided, suggests a motive tied to the will." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on each face. "But the will, it is not the only motive. There are secrets here, debts, scandals, betrayals. Madame Beatrice, you admitted to being in the study at 10 o'clock, smoking a cigarette. You left, you say, before the murder, yet your lipstick matches the stub. Did you return, perhaps? Beatrice gasped, her hands trembling. No, I swear, I didn't. I left him alive. Dr. Vale stood, his voice sharp. Leave her alone, Poirot. She's told you everything. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not everything. Doctor, your alibi, it is weak. The library, yet no book to show for it. And you, Monsieur Lionel, your debts weighed heavily. Sir Edmund's ledger shows a loan unpaid. Did you fear his new will? Lionel's tick pulsed, his voice hoarse. I didn't kill him. I was in the library, I swear. Poirot turned to Rupert, whose pacing had stopped, his face flushed. And you, Monsieur Rupert, seen near the stairs by Thomas moments before. The cry, your debts, too, are considerable. Did you seek to silence your father before he could disinherit you? Rupert's fists clenched, his voice rising. That's nonsense. I wasn't in the study. Thomas is lying. Thomas at the back. Bristled but said nothing, his mother's hand on his arm. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara. Miss Clara, your argument with your father about the estate, it was heated, and the letter, addressed to you. What decision did he make? Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. I don't. No. He never told me. He was angry, yes, but I didn't. I couldn't. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. And you, Madame Margaret, you knew of the will's changes. A legacy to charity, you said. Did you agree with this, or did it threaten your son's future? Margaret's cane tapped once, sharply. Edmund's decision was his own. I had no part in it. Gregory's head snapped up, his voice low. Leave her out of this, Poirot. I didn't need his money. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet your boots, Monsieur Gregory, bear traces of snow as if you walked to the lake. And your sketches, do they hide a truth? Gregory's grip on his notebook tightened, his face pale. They're just drawings. Nothing more. Poirot turned to Evelyn Marsh, her calm demeanour a stark contrast to the other's agitation. Miss Marsh, you knew Sir Edmund's secrets, his correspondence. Did you know of a scandal, perhaps? One he meant to expose? Evelyn's voice was steady. I knew only what he told me. The will was his concern, not mine. Poirot nodded, then addressed the room. The killer is clever, but not infallible. The wax on the glassite came from a candle, one used to light their way in the dark. The footprints to the lake a misdirection, for no one crossed the ice. The locked door. It was not locked when the killer entered, or they had a means to open it. And the cigarette stub, Madame Beatrice, you claim it, but did you leave it to mislead? Beatrice sobbed, shaking her head. No, I told you the truth. Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes were relentless. Then let us test the truth. I propose a small experiment. Inspector Hargreaves, bring the brandy glass and the cigarette stub. And you, Mrs. Poole, fetch a candle from the dining room, one of the red tapers used last night. Hargreaves, grumbling, complied, while Mrs. Poole returned with a candle. Its wick blackened from use. Poirot held it to the light, comparing it to the wax smudge described by the constable. The wax, it matches in colour, now. Let us see who flinches. He lit the candle, its flame casting a warm glow, and placed it on the table beside the brandy glass and cigarette stub. The killer touched this glass, left this stub, walked to the lake to create a false trail. I ask you now, confess, or the little grey cells will name you. The room was silent, the flames flicker the only movement. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Lionel, his tick frozen, his eyes wide with panic. It wasn't me, he blurted, his voice cracking. I swear, I didn't touch the glass. I wasn't there. Poirot's gaze locked onto him. Then why, Monsieur Lionel? Do you tremble at the sight of a candle? Did you light one in the study, perhaps? To see your way to murder? Lionel collapsed into his chair, his face buried in his hands. No. I borrowed money, that's all. I didn't kill him. The others stared, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Poirot's trap had worked, not in forcing a confession, but in revealing fear. Hastings, scribbling furiously, felt the thrill of the moment Poirot had pushed the killer to the edge, and one more nudge might break them. As the clock struck 9:30 p.m., Poirot dismissed the household, his voice calm but firm. "Sleep, if you can. Tomorrow the truth will be clear. The little grey cells, they do not rest." Hastings approached, his voice low. "You've rattled them, Poirot." Lionel's outburst was that the confession you wanted. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Non mon ami. Not a confession, but a reaction. The killer is close, and they know it. The trap is set, and tomorrow they will fall." Chapter 10. The revealed morning of December 26th broke over Winterlake Manor, with a brittle clarity, the snow outside reflecting the cold light of a winter sun. Inside, the drawing-room was a cauldron of anticipation. The household gathered. Once more under the watchful eye of Hercule Poirot, the fire roared, but its warmth did little to thaw the chill of suspicion that hung over the room. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the mantelpiece, his notebook worn from furious scribbling, his heart pounding with the certainty that Poirot was about to unveil the truth. Behind Sir Edmund Winterlake's murder, the clock read 10 a.m., its steady ticker drumroll for the detective's final act. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his compact figure radiating an almost theatrical calm, his mustache a perfect crescent above his serene expression. His green eyes, sharp as ever, swept over the assembled suspects. Clara, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her face pale. Lionel, his tic subdued, but his hands trembling. Beatrice, clinging to Dr. Henry Vale, whose scholarly air was frayed. Margaret, her cane still, her eyes cold. Gregory, clutching his notebook, his gaze averted. Rupert, his charm replaced by a tense stillness, and Evelyn Marsh, her sharp eyes unreadable. The staff, Mrs. Paul, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane stood at the back, their deference masking unease. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate, "we have reached the moment of truth. Sir Edmund Winterlake was murdered in a locked room, his life taken by a letter opener to the heart. The clues: the cigarette stub, the wax on the brandy glass, the footprints to the lake. The unfinished letter have led us through a maze of lies. But the little grey cells, they do not falter. Today, I shall reveal the killer." A hush fell, broken only by Beatrice's stifled sob. Inspector Hargreaves, standing by the door, crossed his arms, his skepticism tempered by curiosity. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his words measured but relentless. "Let us reconstruct the crime," he said. "Sir Edmund retires to his study at 11 o'clock, locking the door. At 11:17, a cry is heard, followed by a thud. By 11:20, Captain Hastings finds him dead, the room in disarray, the window open. Yet the snow outside shows no tracks save those leading to the lake. The brandy glass bears wax, the cigarette stub rose lipstick, and the letter, 'My dear Clara, I have decided,' suggests a motive tied to the will. But it is the how and the why that reveal the who." He turned to the map of the manor, spread on the table. "The study is at the end of the upper corridor, accessible by the main staircase or the servants' stair. The locked door suggests an impossible crime, yet the solution is simple. The door was not locked when the killer entered. Sir Edmund opened it for someone he trusted, or the lock was tampered with." Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Let us begin with the clues. The cigarette stub, bearing rose lipstick, belongs to Madame Beatrice, who admitted to being in the study at 10 o'clock. She claims she left him alive, and I believe her. The stub was a distraction left to mislead. But the wax on the brandy glass, this is the key. It came from a candle used in darkness, not by Sir Edmund, whose study was lit by lamps he held. Up the red taper from the dining room, its wick blackened. This candle, found by Mrs. Poole, matches the wax. But who used it? Not Madame Beatrice, who was with Clara. Not Monsieur Lionel, whose library alibi, though weak, holds. Not Monsieur Rupert, seen by Thomas near the stairs, but not in the study. Not Madame Margaret, nor Monsieur Gregory, whose boots suggest a walk to the lake, but not murder. He turned to Evelyn Marsh, whose calm demeanour flickered for the first time. "Miss Marsh, you were Sir Edmund's secretary, privy to his secrets. you knew of the will, which would leave the estate to charity, cutting out the family you had. Access to the servant's stair, so close to the study, and you smoke, though you claim no lipstick. Yet I observed your desk, Miss Marsh, and found a tube of rose lipstick hidden among your papers. Evelyn's eyes widened, her hands clenching. That's absurd. I told you, I don't use lipstick. Poirot's smile was relentless, yet the lipstick was there, and the cigarette stub matches your brand. But it is the candle that betrays you. In your room, I found a candle, its wick freshly burned, its wax matching the smudge on the glass. You were in the study, Miss Marsh, after 10 o'clock, after Madame Beatrice left. You used the servant's stair, carrying a candle to light your way. The room erupted in gasps. Clara stood, her voice trembling. Evelyn, but why? Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. The why? It is the heart of the matter. Sir Edmund was about to reveal a scandal, one buried in the family's past. Miss Marsh, you were not always a secretary, were you, in his papers? I found a letter, not the one to Clara, but another hidden in a book. It spoke of a child born out of wedlock, abandoned years ago. That child was you, Miss Marsh, Sir Edmund's daughter, unacknowledged, raised in secrecy. Evelyn's face drained of colour, her voice a whisper. No, that's not true. It is true. Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. You learned of your heritage, perhaps from Sir Edmund himself, who promised to reveal it in his new will. But he changed his mind, He decided to leave the estate to charity, not to you. The letter to Clara was to announce his decision to disinherit the family, including you. You could not bear it. You entered the study via the servant's stair, using a duplicate key you had as his secretary. You lit a candle, argued with him, and in a moment of rage, you struck. Evelyn stood, her composure shattered. No, I didn't mean to. He laughed at me, said I was nothing to him. I only wanted what was mine. The room froze, her confession echoing. Hargreaves moved forward, his handcuffs ready. That's enough, Miss Marsh. You're under arrest. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. You planned the footprints to the lake, a false trail to suggest an outsider. You opened the window, scattered the papers, left the cigarette stub to implicate Madame Beatrice. But the wax, Miss Marshett betrayed you. As Hargreaves led Evelyn away, her head bowed. The household sat in stunned silence. Clara wept. Rupert stared at the floor, and Lionel's tick finally stilled. Beatrice clung to Dr. Vale, who whispered reassurances. Margaret's cane tapped once, a final note of judgment. Hastings approached Poirot, his voice low. You did it, old chap. The candle, the lipstick, it all came together. Poirot nodded, his expression sombre. Oui, mon ami. The little grey cells, they see what others miss. But there is no joy in such a truth. A daughter's rage, a father's betrayal, this is the tragedy of Winterlake Manor. As the clock struck 10:30 a.m., Poirot gathered his coat, preparing to leave. The truth had been revealed, the killer unmasked. But the scars of the night would linger long after the snow melted. Chapter 11. The reflection of the late morning light filtered through the tall windows of Winterlake Manor, casting a soft, almost mournful glow over the drawing-room. The fire had dwindled to embers, and the air held a stillness that seemed to echo the resolution of the tragedy that had unfolded. Hercule Poirot stood near the mantelpiece, his compact figure immaculate in his tailored overcoat, his moustache a perfect crescent, though his green eyes carried a weight of quiet contemplation. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated with his notebook now closed, felt a mix of relief and melancholy. The murderer of Sir Edmund Winterlake had been unmasked, but the cost of the truth the family fractured, a secret daughter's rage laid bare left. A bitter aftertaste dot the household, diminished by Evelyn Marsh's arrest. Gathered in a subdued circle, Clara Winterlake sat with her hands folded, her auburn hair neatly pinned once more, though her eyes were red from weeping. Lionel, his nervous tick subdued, stared into the distance, his cufflinks dull in the light. Beatrice, still fragile, leaned against Dr. Henry Vale, whose scholarly demeanour had softened into weary protectiveness, Margaret Winterlake, her cane resting against her chair, maintained her stern composure, though a flicker of sorrow crossed her face. Gregory, her son, had set aside his notebook, his hands idle for the first time. Rupert stood by the window, his restless energy replaced by a quiet resignation. The staff, Mrs. Poole, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane, lingered at the back, their duties forgotten in the wake of the revelation. Inspector Hargreaves, his walrus moustache less bristling, had departed with Evelyn, his earlier scepticism replaced by grudging respect for Poirot's methods. The manor, though still sealed for the police's final formalities, felt oddly empty, as if the weight of its secrets had been lifted, leaving only echoes behind. Poirot addressed the room, his voice soft but resonant, carrying the cadence of a man who understood the fragility of human nature. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, the tragedy of Winterlake Manor is resolved. Miss Evelyn Marsh, driven by the pain of rejection and the fear of a lost legacy, took the life of Sir Edmund Winterlake. The clues, the wax on the brandy glass, the cigarette stub, the footprints to the lake were threads in a tapestry of deception woven to mislead. But the little grey cells, they see through such artifice. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. This was no crime of greed alone, but of the heart. A daughter, unacknowledged, sought recognition only to be met with scorn. In her rage, she struck, using the servant's stare, a candle to light her way, and a key she held as Sir Edmund's trusted secretary. The letter to Miss Clara, the Will's revision, these were the sparks that ignited her desperation. Clara's voice trembled as she spoke. If father had told us, if he hadn't kept her a secret. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. Oui, mademoiselle. Secrets are the seeds of tragedy. Sir Edmund's silence, his decision to disinherit his family, set this chain in motion. But the fault lies not with the victim, nor with the family, but with the choice to act in violence. He turned to Beatrice, whose confession had been a turning point. Madame Beatrice, your honesty, though late, was crucial. The cigarette stub, it pointed to you, but also to the truth that another used it to mislead. You showed courage in speaking. Beatrice nodded, her voice barely audible. I only wish I'd spoken sooner. Dr. Vale squeezed her hand, his face etched with relief. It's over now, my dear. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lionel and Rupert. Monsieur Lionel, Monsieur Rupert, your debts and fears were motives. Oui, but they did not lead to murder. The ledger, it revealed your struggles, but not your guilt. Lionel's shoulders sagged, his voice low. I thought he'd cut me off. I was desperate, but not that desperate. Rupert nodded, his usual charm absent. I didn't want to lose everything, but I couldn't have done it. Margaret spoke, her voice cold but tinged with regret. Edmund was a fool to keep such secrets. If he'd been honest, none of this. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. Honesty, madam, is a choice as is deception. Sir Edmund chose to hide his daughter, and Evelyn chose to act on her pain. We cannot undo their choices, only learn from them. He turned to Gregory, whose dark eyes met his with a flicker of defiance. Monsieur Gregory, your boots and your sketches, they suggested a walk to the lake, perhaps to aid the deception of the footprints, but you were not the killer, only a witness to a family's unraveling. Gregory's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence a concession. Poirot addressed the staff last. Mrs. Poole, Thomas, Mrs. Crane, you served this house loyally, yet you saw its fractures. The servant's stare, so close to the study, was the path to murder, but you did not take it. Mrs. Poole nodded, her face pale. We only did our duty, sir. Thomas, his sullenness softened, muttered, I saw Mr. Rupert, but I didn't know what was happening. Mrs. Crane, her hands still dusted with flour, added, It's a terrible thing, sir. This house won't be the same. Poirot's expression grew sombre. None, it will not. A house built on secrets cannot stand unchanged. But you, all of you, must rebuild with truth, with forgiveness. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, you have been my eyes and ears, as always. The truth, it is a heavy burden, but it sets us free." Hastings smiled faintly, his heart heavy. "You've done it again, Poirot. But it's a grim victory, isn't it?" "Oui," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "The little grey cells. They triumph, but the heart it mourns. Murder is not just a crime. It is a wound that scars all who touch it." He gathered his valise, adjusting his scarf with fastidious care. "I shall depart now, for my work here is done. The police will handle the formalities, and Winterlake Manor must find its way forward." Clara stood, her voice steady despite her tears. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you. You've given us the truth, even if it hurts." Poirot bowed, his manner gentle. "The truth, mademoiselle, is a gift, though it comes at a cost. Use it wisely." As he and Hastings stepped into the entrance hall, the snow outside gleaming under the midday sun, Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the manor's grand facade. "Hastings, the human heart it is a puzzle greater than any locked room. We solve one mystery, only to find another waiting." Hastings nodded, pulling his coat tighter against the chill. "Will they recover, do you think, the Winterlakes, Poirot's?" Smile was wistful. "In time, mon ami. Time and truth heal all wounds, though the scars remain." They stepped into the waiting taxi, the manor receding behind them, its secrets laid bare. As the clock struck 11 a.m., Poirot leaned back, his eyes closing, his mind already turning to the next challenge. For Hercule Poirot, the little grey cells never rested, and the world, with all its mysteries, awaited his scrutiny. Chapter 12. Echoes of the past snow-covered grounds of Winterlake Manor gleamed under the pale midday sun, a deceptive tranquillity settling over the estate as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings prepared to depart. The revelation of Evelyn Marsh as Sir Edmund Winterlake's killer had left the household in a state of stunned mourning, their secrets exposed like raw nerves. Yet, as Poirot adjusted his scarf with meticulous care in the entrance hall, a faint unease lingered in Hastings's mind. The case was solved, the murderer confessed. But something about the manor's heavy silence suggested an untold story, a final thread yet to be unravelled. The drawing room, where the family and staff had gathered for Poirot's dramatic reveal, was now nearly empty. Clara Winterlake had retreated to her room, her grief tempered by resolve to face the future. Lionel, his nervous tic subdued, sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. Beatrice and Dr. Henry Vale had withdrawn to console each other, their bond strengthened by the ordeal. Margaret Winterlake, ever stern, remained in her armchair. Her cane a silent sentinel, Gregory, her son, had vanished to the conservatory, his sketches abandoned. Rupert lingered near the window, his restless energy now a quiet contemplation. The staff, Mrs. Poole, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane, had returned to their duties, their faces etched with the strain of a house forever changed. Hastings, standing by the grand staircase, glanced at Poirot, who was inspecting his reflection in a polished brass mirror. "Poirot," he ventured, "it's over, isn't it? Evelyn's confession, the candle, the lipstick, it all fits. Yet I can't shake the feeling we've missed something." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with that familiar spark of intuition. "Mon ami, you are perceptive. The case, it is solved, oui. But the heart of Winterlake Manor beats with echoes of the past. There is one detail, small but significant, that lingers. Come, we shall make one final inquiry before we depart." He led Hastings back to the drawing-room, where Margaret Winterlake sat alone, her stern gaze softening as they entered. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low but steady, "you've done your work. Why do you linger?" Poirot bowed slightly, his manner gentle but probing. "Madam, the truth is revealed, but not complete. The letter Sir Edmund wrote, my dear Clara. I have decided. It was not the only letter in the study. Another, hidden in a book, spoke of Evelyn Marsh, his unacknowledged daughter. But there is more, I think. A secret you, as his sister, may know." Margaret's grip on her cane tightened, her eyes narrowing. Edmund was a private man. "Monsieur Poirot, if there were other secrets, he kept them even from me." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Yet you knew of Evelyn, did you not? Not as his secretary, but as his daughter. You hinted at his plan to leave the estate to charity. But there is another truth, buried deeper. A scandal, perhaps, that shaped this family's fractures. Margaret's face hardened, but a flicker of sorrow crossed her eyes. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You are relentless, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I knew of Evelyn. Edmund told me years ago, when she was a child, sent away to avoid disgrace. He regretted it. You know his silence, his cruelty. He meant to make amends in the new will, not by giving her the estate, but by acknowledging her, publicly. It was to be his redemption. Hastings's eyes widened. Chapter 13. The unseen wound taxi carrying Hercule Poirot. And Captain Arthur Hastings rolled away from Winterlake Manor, its wheels crunching through the snow. As the grand estate faded into the distance, the midday sun, though bright, cast a cold light, and the air held a crispness that mirrored the lingering unease in Hastings's heart. The case was solved. Evelyn Marsh's confession had unmasked her as Sir Edmund Winterlake's killer, and yet the manor's secrets seemed to cling to them like the frost on the windows. Poirot, seated beside Hastings, adjusted his gloves with fastidious care, his green eyes distant, as though his mind still wandered the corridors of Winterlake inside the manor. The household remained in a state of fragile recovery. The drawing room, once a stage for Poirot's revelations, was now a quiet refuge where the Winterlake family grappled with the aftermath. Clara Winterlake stood by the window, her auburn hair catching the light, her gaze fixed on the snow-covered lawn where the footprints to the lake had long since faded. Lionel sat slumped in an armchair, his nervous tick absent for the first time, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. Beatrice and Dr. Henry Vale sat close, their hands entwined, their faces etched with the strain of survival. Margaret Winterlake, her stern demeanour softened by grief, leaned on her cane, her eyes distant. Gregory, her son, had retreated to the conservatory, his sketches abandoned, his silence a shield against the family's wounds. Rupert lingered near the fire, his usual restlessness subdued, his thoughts unreadable. The staff, Mrs. Poole, Thomas, and Mrs. Crane moved through their duties with mechanical precision, their faces marked by the weight of a house forever altered. Hastings, glancing back at the manor as the taxi rounded a bend, broke the silence. Poirot, it's done, isn't it? Evelyn's confession, the candle, the letter, it all fits. But why do I feel there's still something unresolved? Poirot's mustache twitched, his voice low and thoughtful. Mon ami, you sense what the little grey cells have already noted. A case may be solved, but the heart of a family, it does not heal so easily. The murder of Sir Edmund was the climax of a tragedy long in the making. There is one final thread, a wound unseen, that we must acknowledge before we leave Winterlake behind. He signalled the driver to stop, the taxi halting at the edge of the estate's grounds. Come, Hastings, Poirot said, stepping into the snow. We shall return. Briefly, to ensure no shadow remains, they re-entered the manor, the entrance hall quiet save for the distant clink of dishes from the kitchen. Mrs. Poole, startled by their return, met them at the door. Monsieur Poirot. Captain Hastings, is something wrong? Poirot's smile was gentle. None, madam, nothing is wrong. But there is a matter of the heart that must be addressed. Please, summon Miss Clara to the drawing-room. Clara appeared moments later, her face pale but composed, her eyes wary. Monsieur Poirot, you've returned. Is there more? Poirot bowed slightly, his manner soft but resolute. Mademoiselle Clara, the truth of your father's murder has been revealed, but there is one final truth you must face. The letter, my dear Clara, I have decided, was not merely about the will, but about you, his eldest, his heir in spirit. Sir Edmund, in his final moments, wished to entrust you with the future of Winterlake Manor, not as a burden, but as a legacy of redemption. Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. But why didn't he tell me? Why keep Evelyn a secret, even from me? Poirot's gaze was steady. Because, mademoiselle, he feared your judgment, your ambition. He saw in you the strength to lead, but also the pride that divided this family. The letter, It was his attempt to bridge the divide, to ask you to heal what he could not. Clara sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. I was so angry with him, about the estate, about everything. If I'd known about Evelyn— You could not have known, Poirot said gently. But you know now. The unseen wound. It is the silence between you all, between sister and brother, mother and son, father and daughter. Evelyn's crime was her own, but it was born of that silence. You, Clara, must break it. She nodded, her voice barely audible. I'll try, Monsieur Poirot. For father, for all of us. Poirot turned to the others who had gathered silently, drawn by the sound of voices. Mesdames et messieurs, the murder is solved, but the healing, it begins with you. Lionel, your debts do not define you. Rupert, your recklessness can be tempered. Madame Beatrice, your fragility is your strength. Dr. Vale, your loyalty is your guide. Madame Margaret, your wisdom must now be kindness. Gregory, your art can tell the truth. And you, Mrs. Poole. Thomas, Mrs. Crane, you are the heart of this house. Together you can rebuild what was broken. Margaret's cane tapped softly, her voice low. You ask much, Monsieur Poirot, but perhaps you are right. Edmund's death, it's a chance to start anew. Poirot nodded, his eyes warm. The little grey cells, they solve the crime, but the heart, it solves the pain. Use this chance, Msamis. He turned to Hastings, his voice soft. Come, mon ami. Our work here is truly done. They stepped back into the entrance hall, the clock striking 12:15 p.m., its chime of gentle farewell. As they climbed into the taxi, Hastings looked at Poirot, his heart lighter but still heavy with the weight of the manor's wounds. You always see the human side, don't you, Poirot? Not just the clues, but the people. Poirot's smile was wistful. We, Hastings. The clues, they lead to the killer, but the people, they lead to the truth. Winterlake Manor will bear its scars, but it will endure. The taxi pulled away, the manor receding into the snow, its silhouette a testament to both tragedy and hope. Hastings leaned back, his notebook tucked away, reflecting on Poirot's words. The case was closed, but the echoes of the past love, betrayal and redemption would linger, shaping the future of those left behind. Chapter 14. The legacy of Winterlake, a taxi carrying Hercule Poirot, and Captain Arthur Hastings wound its way through the snow-draped lanes of the Cotswolds, the spires of Winterlake Manor now a distant memory against the winter sky. The clock in the manor's entrance hall had struck 12:30 p.m. as they departed, its chime a final note in the symphony of tragedy and truth that had unfolded within its walls. Hastings, seated beside Poirot, felt a quiet satisfaction mingled with sorrow, the weight of the case lingering like the cold seeping through the taxi's windows. The murder of Sir Edmund Winterlake had been solved, Evelyn Marsh's confession laying bare a tale of betrayal and rage. But the manor's future and the family's healing remained an open question. Poirot, his overcoat immaculate despite the journey, gazed out at the passing fields, his green eyes reflective, his moustache a perfect crescent. Mon ami, he said, breaking the silence, you're troubled, non, the case is closed. The killer unmasked, yet you ponder the echoes of Winterlake. Hastings nodded, his notebook resting in his lap, its pages filled with the details of the past days. You're right, Poirot. Evelyn's crime, the secrets, the family's pain, it's also unfinished. Clara and the others, can they really move forward after this? Poirot's smile was gentle, tinged with the wisdom of one who had seen many such dramas. The human spirit, Hastings, it is resilient, though scarred. The Winterlakes have faced their truth. Now they must choose their path. Let us consider what we leave behind. Back at the manor, the drawing-room was a scene of tentative reconciliation. Clara Winterlake, her auburn hair catching the light, stood before the family, her voice steady despite the grief etched in her features. Father's death. Evelyn's betrayal, it's torn us apart, she said, addressing Lionel, Rupert, Beatrice, Dr. Vale, Margaret and Gregory, who sat in a loose circle, their faces a mix of exhaustion and hope. But Monsieur Poirot was right. We can't let silence destroy us again. We must talk, rebuild together. Lionel, his nervous tick absent, looked up, his voice soft. I've been a fool, Clara. The debts, the scheming I thought father would always bail me out. I want to change. Rupert, standing by the fire, nodded, his usual restlessness subdued. I was scared, too, of losing everything. But I don't want to be that person anymore. Let's keep the manor, make it ours. Beatrice, her hand in Dr. Vale's, spoke through tears. I hid my fears, my weaknesses. I won't any more. Henry, and I will help, Clara. Dr. Vale adjusted his spectacles, his scholarly air softened by resolve. The manor can be more than a relic, a school, perhaps, or a community centre, something to honour Sir Edmund's memory. Margaret, her cane resting against her chair, sighed, her sternness giving way to vulnerability. I failed Edmund, keeping his secrets. I won't fail you, Clara. You have my support. Gregory, emerging from the conservatory, held his notebook, his voice low but firm. I've been hiding in my sketches, avoiding all this, but I'll stay. Help rebuild. For father, for us. Double quotes Mrs. Poole, Thomas and Mrs. Crane, listening from the doorway. Exchanged glances. Mrs. Poole stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. Miss Clara, we've served this house through its darkest days. We'll serve it through its new ones. If you'll have us. Clara's eyes glistened, but her smile was determined. Thank you, all of you. Winterlake Manor will stand, not as a monument to secrets, but as a home for truth, outside in the taxi. Poirot listened as Hastings recounted his thoughts. It's a lot to ask of them, Poirot. To heal, to change after all this, Poirot said, his voice soft but certain. But the truth, it is a foundation. Clara, she has the strength to lead them. The manor, it will be their legacy, not of wealth, but of redemption. Hastings glanced at his friend, marvelling at the depth beneath his fastidious exterior. You saw it all, didn't you? Not just the clues, but the people, their hearts. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little grey cells, they see the clues, but the heart, it sees the human. The murder of Sir Edmund was a crime of passion, of pain. Evelyn's act was her own, but it was born of a family's silence. Now, that silence is broken. The taxi slowed as they approached the village, where a train awaited to carry them back to London. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise. Hastings, we have done our part. The Winterlakes must write the next chapter. For us, there are other mysteries, other truths to uncover. Hastings smiled, his melancholy lifting. You're never done, are you, Poirot? Always another puzzle. Precisement, Poirot said, his moustache twitching with amusement. The world, it is full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot, he is never idle. As the taxi pulled up to the station, the clock tower chimed 1 p.m., its sound carrying across the snow-dusted fields. Winterlake Manor, with its scars and its hopes, receded into the past, but its legacy of family learning to heal would endure. Hastings followed Poirot onto the platform, his heart lighter, ready for whatever mystery awaited them next. Chapter 15. The final farewell train to London rattled through the snow-draped Cotswolds, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to the quiet introspection of Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings. The winter sun hung low, casting a golden glow over the fields, as if bidding farewell to the tragedy of Winterlake Manor. Inside the carriage, Poirot sat with his usual precision, his overcoat neatly folded, his moustache a perfect crescent, his green eyes reflective as he gazed out the window. Hastings, opposite him, clutched his worn notebook, its pages a chronicle of the case that had unfolded over the past days. The clock on the platform had read 1:15 p.m. as they boarded, and now, as the train carried them away, the weight of the manor's secrets seemed to linger, a faint echo of the truth they had uncovered. Hastings broke the silence, his voice soft. Poirot, it's over, isn't it? The murder solved, the family set on a path to heal. Yet I can't help feeling we've left something behind, some final piece of the puzzle. Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile gentle but knowing. Mon ami, you are sentimental, as always. The puzzle, it is complete, the killer unmasked, the motives laid bare. Evelyn Marsh's crime was the culmination of a family's silence. And that silence, it has been broken. But you are right to sense a lingering thread. It is not a clue, but a lesson, one that Winterlake Manor has taught us all. He leaned forward, his hands steepled, his voice low and thoughtful. The case of Sir Edmund Winterlake, it was not merely about murder, but about the human heart, its capacity for love, for betrayal, for redemption. Each suspect, each secret was a mirror to the soul of this family. Clara's ambition, Lionel's. Greed, Rupert's recklessness, Beatrice's fragility, Margaret's sternness. Gregory's isolation, these were the threads that wove the tragedy. And Evelyn, the unacknowledged daughter, her rage was the spark that set it aflame. Hastings nodded, his eyes distant. And now they must live with it, Clara leading them, the others following. Or trying to. Do you think they'll succeed? Poirot's gaze softened, his voice tinged with hope. The future. It is not for Hercule Poirot to predict, but to observe. Clara, she has the strength to guide them, to transform Winterlake Manor into a place of truth, not secrets. The others, they have their flaws, but also their potential. The little grey cells. They see the crime, but the heart, it sees the possibility of renewal. Back at the manor, the family had gathered once more in the drawing room. The fire rekindled, its warmth a tentative promise of brighter days. Clara stood at the centre, her auburn hair gleaming, her voice steady as she addressed her kin. Father's death, Evelyn's betrayal, it's shown us what we've become, but it's also shown us what we can be. Winterlake Manor is ours to rebuild, not as a monument to the past, but as a home for the future. Lionel, his face weary but resolute, spoke first. I've been selfish, Clara. I'll stay. Help however I can. No more schemes. Rupert, his restlessness replaced by determination, nodded. I'm done running, Clara. Let's make the manor something Father would have been proud of. Beatrice, her hand in Dr. Vale's, smiled through tears. Henry and I will support you. Maybe a school, like he suggested, to give back to the community. Dr. Vale adjusted his spectacles, his voice firm. It's what Sir Edmund would have wanted in the end. A legacy of good, not greed. Margaret, her cane resting lightly, met Clara's gaze. I was wrong to keep his secrets, Clara. You have my wisdom, my strength, for what it's worth. Gregory, emerging from his silence, held up a new sketch, a vision of the manor, its gardens blooming, its doors open to the world. This is my contribution, he said quietly. A new beginning. Mrs. Poole, Thomas and Mrs. Crane, standing at the back, exchanged glances. Mrs. Poole stepped forward, her voice steady. Miss Clara, we've served this house through its darkest days. We'll serve it through its brightest, if you'll have us. Clara's eyes glistened, her smile radiant. Thank you, all of you. Winterlake Manor will stand, not for wealth or power, but for us, for family, in the train. Poirot listened as Hastings recounted his hopes for the Winterlakes. You gave them a chance, Poirot, Hastings said. Your truth, it set them free. We, Poirot replied, his eyes twinkling. The truth, it is a key, unlocking not just the mystery, but the heart. The Winterlakes, they have a chance to write. A new story, one of healing, not pain. The train slowed as it approached a small station, the countryside giving way to the first signs of London's sprawl. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Hastings, the world, it is full of mysteries, of hearts to understand. Our work, it is never done. Hastings smiled, his melancholy lifting. Another case, then. You'll have me tagging along, as always, precisement. Poirot said, his moustache twitching. With amusement, the little grey cells, they need their faithful companion. Together, we shall face whatever puzzles await. As the train pulled into the station, the clock tower chimed to PM. It sounded gentle farewell to the case of Winterlake Manor. The snow, the secrets. The tragedy, they were behind them now, but the lesson of the heart, as Poirot had said, would endure. Hastings followed his friend onto the platform, ready for the next adventure, knowing that wherever there was mystery, Hercule Poirot would bring light to the shadows.